So it says it's streaming live, but I am not seeing it yet. Are you guys seeing it?
It doesn't matter. We're live. We're
Oh,
here.
all right. So good morning, everybody. So first I want to thank you for your time participating today and listening to this incredibly important ESE education story. I'm Sue Meminger and my partner is Susan Majors. Say hello.
Hello.
And today with us, we are so inspired and impressed by our guest, Mrs. Marina Boudreau, who is an absolutely amazing advocate for her son. She's brave, she's organized, she knows her stuff, and she is joining us today to tell her story to benefit other parents and let people understand what really the system operates like, how difficult it is to navigate, and what parents have to go through to get a free and appropriate education for their children. And it's all just a broken system that doesn't need to be so. So we believe the only way to impact effective change is by people telling their stories and people uniting. And we appreciate you, Marina, today so much for doing that. So to that end, before we get started, I'm going to take one quick second. I'm going to make sure everybody's aware of a new app that will do just that. It allows you to tell your story. It allows you to tell as much or as little of your story as you'd like to tell. But we believe if it's happening to you, it's happening to others. And the only way to change it is unity. So please consider downloading the School Talk app and pick your school and tell your story so you can learn what parents are going through at your school and tell others what you're going through at your school. If it's happening to you, it's happening to others. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Susan Majors and Marina Boudreau, and I will try to monitor questions and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Sue. Marina, thanks so much for being with us today. We are just adore you, and we're so thrilled to have a chance to talk about what you've been through. You're welcome to Sarasota. And
Thank you.
So give us a little bit of background about your family and how you came to the school district.
I'm happy to do that. First of all, I do have to say, just thank you for that lovely intro. The feeling is absolutely mutual, and I'm honored to be here today and to have a place to tell my story, to hopefully let other parents know that they're not alone out there in what they're going through. So our story, to summarize, we moved to Sarasota for the schools back in October. We came from Massachusetts and previously from California. So I've been navigating the system across 3 different states, 3 different school districts. My son, I have 2 children in the Sarasota system. One of them holds an IEP and has held an IEP since preschool. So this is not my first rodeo. And as I said, we entered the system in October. I felt very confident coming in, mostly because our previous IEP had been finalized 2 weeks before we came. So I really felt we had worked with an advocate previously. We had a really good IEP after many years of trying to establish appropriate services. So it was, I came in by myself. It was the first time in many years that I decided not to work with an advocate. I just felt strongly that I wanted to set the tone with the team and to let them know that I was here to work collaboratively, especially given the past year and how difficult it's been for our schools, our teachers, our administrators, our families. I wanted to work collaboratively, and it backfired spectacularly, I should add.
So what was the first thing that happened when you arrived at the school? Was that a welcome? Like, how was your customer service when you first enrolled at the school or tried to enroll?
The first impression was fine. There were, phone conversations that took place, and with the ESE liaison at the school at the time. So in one of those first conversations, I was told that they had reviewed my son's IEP, that they had spoken to his previous district, his previous teachers and case managers, and had determined that the school that we had chosen here in Sarasota, that we had found our rental home for, we had honed in on that and found a house that was zoned in that district, in that school, excuse me, would not be able to provide the services that were on my son's IEP, that another school in the district would better fit his needs. To tell you the truth, I'm no expert, but that was a huge red flag for me. And at that point, I transitioned all communication to email. I refused to answer phone calls, and the phone calls kept coming, but I would recap via email and wait for them to respond, because it was a big flag, a big red flag.
So your prior experience told you, oh, if it isn't in writing, it didn't happen, and I need to start documenting what's going on here.
Exactly. And that again, I'm not an expert. I do not know the law in this state, but I knew that it was not right to say, well, we just can't do this. You go here, go here instead. And yes, my previous experience told me document everything in writing. So no more phone conversations after that point. And that was very early on in our interaction. And as a side note, I will say that this is one of the reasons why I'm very confident in sharing my story, because everything that I will assert today that I have said previously is documented, every single little thing. And that, as a parent, gives me a lot of confidence to keep fighting this fight, because there is nothing that I have said or alleged that is not true, that it cannot be backed up with evidence. So documenting everything in writing is so important.
So you didn't wind up going to the other school.
No.
You went to your neighborhood school. Your boys are in the same school.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was important. That was a value that you as a family held, that was an important part of your children's educational opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, the school had great ratings. And I have to say, my son's teachers, both of them, are fantastic. So we don't have a ton of experience in the school, but in that sense, I knew that it was going to be a good fit, and I'm very glad that I followed my gut on that.
So talk about the environment though. Your boys, are they in brick and mortar right now?
They're not. So both of my children are remote learners right now.
Okay, so you were home, you're going to be able to see what's going on day to day. And so what happened next? You started school.
So they started school. It was a little bit of a slow rollout to get them registered. But we got through that, and we got them set up as remote learners. And then I was told that we needed to, meet as a team, sort of as a meet and greet. It was really an informal meeting. And I would also consent to evaluations at that point. I actually thought it was an IEP meeting, but that's, beside the point. We did that meeting remotely. I met the team. At that point, they explained to me that, as coming in from another state, my son, even though he had just had a massive triennial evaluation across the board, that he would need another OT evaluation. So, I said, okay. I mean, I was a little shocked by that, but I said, okay, if that was the law, then we would have to follow protocol. And then they said we would schedule the IEP meeting after that. So that meeting, the OT evaluation took place, and then that meeting was scheduled for December 2nd. So again, my children started school October 14th of last year, and our first IEP meeting was December 2nd.
So there was a little bit of gap. And was your son receiving services during that window?
Not that I am aware. I contacted the team several times to ask, again, via email, what services is he receiving now, or how, excuse me, how is he receiving services? Because again, being a remote learner, there was no set schedule for these services. Excuse me. And I could see, I'm here and at home with him, that he was not really receiving the services as outlined in his previous IEP. So yeah, it was
But you
really
still,
And what's an important
you
thing
were still
to,
giving everybody the benefit. Exactly. You were still allowing
yes,
them.
absolutely. I
you
gave
know,
them the benefit of the doubt. I asked those questions. I did get phone calls. Some of those phone calls, the providers were on the call. So it would be the ESC liaison and the provider. And I would ask, what services are being offered. And it would sort of be this conversation of like, well, how does your son work? What does he need? And it was confusing to me. And again, I am a seasoned parent, so I wasn't really sure what was happening in those conversations. It would have been a lot more clear had those been an email, but really they were trying to avoid giving me a clear answer. In hindsight, that's what was happening.
but you didn't realize that quite at the time yet.
I did not. And again, I was still thinking, we're just going to work collaboratively. It's okay. We're going to wait for the IEP meeting. Everything will be okay.
So it's important for everybody to know that when a parent transfers state to state, during this interim period where the receiving state has an opportunity to develop their own, plan for the child, they convert it kind of from one state's paper to their paper, and make sure that the child meets eligibility criteria for the receiving state's programs, because every state has their own set of state laws that are how they implement federal law. They're supposed to be offering comparable services to make sure that the child is receiving a free and appropriate public education. So they are supposed to take whatever data they have at hand that the parent has maybe brought with them, or because sometimes there's a lag between the child arriving and the records arriving from the sending school. But if the parent arrives with an IEP in hand and evaluations in hand, it is incumbent upon the receiving school to take that information and use it to ensure that the child is having the best educational experience that they can have.
which was
Okay.
your situation, right? You came, you said, hello, here are my children. Here is his IEP. How can we work together?
Exactly. That was exactly my situation. And I knew that they were legally bound to provide the services that were outlined in his previous IEP. But again, my mistake was that I did not want to be combative, particularly before the actual meeting. I wanted to have a collaborative relationship with them. I thought that if I did that, that they would be more willing to work with me and to provide the services that my son deserves and is entitled to.
But I want to stop you there, Marina, because I've known you since December and been in meetings with you, and you have never been combative, and you have always been collaborative. So I think, you maybe didn't send the emails or become as persistent as you should have been, but yeah, I just needed to clarify that for people that don't know you as well yet, before we get into the meat and potatoes of
Well,
what
I was
thanks.
going to say, yeah, even once things kind of went south, combative was not the word I would have ever labeled you with.
Well, I've always
No.
tried to be professional. I understand that on the other side of this, it's just people. And I do like to give people the benefit of the doubt. But again, I would have done things so differently. I would not have put so much importance on perhaps on being viewed as, just a very nice person. And it's fine to be nice and also, be assertive. You can be both things. But, no district is perfect. And I had come from previous situations where, we had to overcome hurdles, and it was taxing on my family. It was taxing on me. But we had finally gotten to a good place, and I wanted to maintain that.
Right.
At all costs. I wanted to maintain that. And I understand now that the only way to maintain that is to be incredibly assertive and well-informed and bring support like advocates if you are able to.
So you went to the December meeting. The December meeting happened and you went, and it was held via Zoom, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so what happened in the December meeting?
So the December meeting,
the short version.
the short version of that. Well, the short version is that I logged on and there were district reps at the meeting. That's one of the first points that really took me back a little bit. And very early on in the conversation, there was one of the district reps said to me, this IEP meeting is to, we are not agreeing on eligibility. We are simply, taking this as that he is eligible. It was worded very, very specifically. And I remember asking her and saying, wait, but he is eligible. You have an IEP. He has been eligible for an IEP for a year. So you're not questioning that, are you? And again, I got a very roundabout answer. And that set the tone of the meeting. There were no clear answers. It was very much, well, we're looking at this IEP, but we don't have data to support these services. Which I also challenged. And I said, well, you have data from the previous state, from Massachusetts. And they said, well, but not in our environment. And my response to that was, well, it was a classroom with desks and children and a teacher. So I don't understand what you mean by not in your environment. This is valid data. So maybe that gives you a sense of what the tone was like. And it was not a pleasant experience as a parent alone at the meeting with, an entire team and 2 district reps. And at that point, I had not received a prior written notice. And I was just told, we can't, my son previously had a one-on-one aid. They said, we can't do that. We need our own data. He had access to the motor room. Well, we don't have that, so we're not offering that. And that's how it went.
So the IEP that was developed by the end of the meeting, was it comparable to what you had come with?
It wasn't, but I also didn't get to see the document. Yeah, I didn't get to see that document. So I don't know if other parents are aware, but when Zoom meetings are held, they use a program, a software program where they input fields. So what you're looking at on the screen is not the actual document. So, again, it was completely new to me and they were inputting the information and then the meeting was done. And my impression was that I would receive a draft of the IEP after the meeting. I did not receive the draft of the IEP after the meeting. This meeting was held on December 2nd. And on December 15th, I happened to realize oh, it's December 15th. I haven't gotten an IEP. So I reached out to the school and said, is there anything that you need from me? And this is all in email, so it's all in writing because I haven't gotten the draft. If you're waiting on me for something, please let me know. I'd like to review the IEP. And they said, oh, well, here's the draft. I'm sorry, here's the IEP, not the draft. Here's the IEP. I looked it over. And there were some, there were changes. It did not look, it was not comparable to the Massachusetts IEP. So I sent them my changes. And at that point, the response that I got was, well, if you want to make changes, we need to reconvene as an IEP team because this IEP is closed. And that was shocking to me.
Let me make sure we're clear.
Yeah.
You went to a meeting by video,
Correct.
not in person. You worked with a team that was bigger than you anticipated. You weren't particularly welcomed.
Right.
And it did not feel collaborative. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I heard.
That's correct.
And at the end of it, you were not given a finalized document. It took more than 10 days and your request in order to get the document that had been finalized that you thought was still waiting for your input to make sure you agreed with what had been developed.
Correct. Yes. And again, in my experience, this has always been, in Massachusetts and California, this has always been the process. After a meeting, you are able to look over a draft, you give your input, and then you get the draft back with the changes and you sign and finalized. So when I was told, well, we'll need to, make changes, this is a final document, I said, well, I haven't signed the IEP. How can it be final? And the response that I got was, well, you don't need to sign it. And this is the final document. The document has been finalized. And at that point, I panicked. And my heart just dropped. And it is a feeling that I won't ever forget, because I think it took me back to all those starting years when everything was so difficult. And I thought, oh no, here we are again. And that's when I reached out to you.
And we're so glad you did, because we just adore you. And we're sorry that this is how we met, but we're so happy to be part of your team.
Well, thank you.
So you communicated with your school and you took them up on their offer for another IEP meeting, and it was scheduled in January.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to the meeting, how did you prep for that?
Well, there was actually a little bit of back and forth. I don't know if you all remember this, but at first they didn't schedule an IEP meeting. They scheduled a parent conference. And and we found out, I think the day before, that they hadn't sent a meeting notice because it wasn't an IEP meeting. And again, had I not met you both and had you on my team at that point, I would have attended that meeting and thought, oh, this is an IEP meeting, because they did not specify otherwise. So we had to reschedule, and we rescheduled again an actual IEP meeting. And during that time, I shared records with you both, and we compared documents to see what was missing, and it was substantial. And I prepared a list of parent concerns.
So we went to the meeting, and was it typical for you, Marina?
No. No, I mean, I had met this team on December 2nd, and as I said, the tone was not great. And this January meeting, I think it was the 22nd, I was really stunned. You were both at the meeting with me, and all of a sudden it was a different tone. Everything was great. They were happy to add things onto the IEP that they had previously told me could not be added. And I was really shocked. I was really taken aback by that, and very upset, because I kept thinking, oh, so this is it. This is it. Now I have advocates. Now all of a sudden you're going to offer comparable services. And it really, it was very unpleasant for me. It felt very insulting.
And we agree that parents shouldn't need advocates. I mean, honestly, we love our parents and we love being collaborative parts of school teams. But if we never had to go to another IEP meeting because parents didn't need us, that would be the best retirement ever.
Yeah.
For 20 years, we keep saying, we don't want to do IEP meetings anymore. Let's just fix this. Let's just make the system work. So in that meeting,
at the beginning, I want to add one more thing. At the beginning of that meeting, and we see this, they put a time limit with the timer. You have 1 hour, Mrs. Boudreau. And at the end of the hour, we're going to stop. It was like, sometimes you see schools where it's like that fire drill that comes up in the middle of something that nobody wants to talk about. This meeting was the timer. And the other thing that I recall from that meeting, Marina, is you were actually, I think, a little bit in shock, because you were saying things like, wait, I'm confused, because at the last meeting you said, and to the same person that said it, and they acted like that didn't happen, which is not also collaborative, in my opinion, with parents that you should be working with. So those are the two standouts from, and I know it's not my story. I'm going to back off.
No, but
that's
I
just the
agree
piece
with
I
you.
remember.
It did, as I said, it felt insulting that all of a sudden, you know, they were so receptive to my input when previously they had not been. And really the only thing that changed was your presence. You didn't even say that much at that meeting. Like, I remember that.
Yeah.
And I could not believe it. I could not believe it. And again, I am also of the opinion that every family deserves to be treated the same way, whether they are able to afford support or not.
And so
Yes.
what I recall that was the strange part of this was that you had given them your written list of concerns. And instead of opening the IEP, since it was an IEP meeting, we went through this exercise of how were we going to notate what the team was agreeing to. And so it was going to be, somebody was going to take notes off screen. And I don't know, it was just a strange activity that occurred. And so finally, we just opened the IEP software on the screen so we could all see transparently what was happening. Because, you know, even in the best of cases where everybody is on the same page and working collaboratively, when you're working through video conferencing, communication gets lost. You know, you're not in the same room, you can't read body language, you can't watch what somebody's doing and go, oh, that isn't exactly what I said, because you see them write it and it's not exactly how it is. So having that screen share where everybody is working from the same set of words is really vital, so that at the end of the process, it says what everybody thought it said or should say.
But it took us to ask. It took us to say, hey, why are we going through all this? Please, why can't we just open the IEP? It wasn't offered. It wasn't, it was, I don't know, can I say predetermined that we were going to do something a little bit differently than we would do in a typical IEP meeting? But at least they opened it when we asked. But
They did.
And I have to say, like, these are procedural issues that a parent would not catch. I would have not caught that. I wouldn't have caught previously, you know, that they had scheduled a parent conference as opposed to an IEP meeting. I would not have caught that. And I would not have caught that, Sue, that they had not opened the IEP at that meeting until you requested it. So, and again, as a parent who has been in the system for a long time, and in Massachusetts, we had virtual IEPs because we were there after the pandemic started, and it worked just fine. This thing that I keep hearing in Florida of, well, we just can't do that. Well, it can be done. We had Zoom meetings in Massachusetts where we all saw the document in a screen share, and then the draft was sent to me. A hard copy was sent to me to review. That is the logical way to do things.
So we got through that meeting, and it was, I mean, we got about halfway through your list of concerns, and they did reschedule another session. And then, as I recall it, there was a death in a family or for a staff member. It was something last minute, and you were like, no problem. You know, I understand, life happens. And, or, you know, and so let's have you know, they gave us a new date to finish the second half of this meeting. And in the interim, as I recall, you went through things, and there were a few more things that were concerning.
Yeah, so at that point, I found out that the ESC teacher that was assigned to Jaden had gone on maternity leave. And I wasn't, and again, I wasn't aware of that. I guess a letter was sent home, but with children who were in brick and mortar. So I did not get that letter. On the day before she was supposed to go out, or a couple of days before, got an email from the teacher saying, hey, I'm leaving. I just want to get everything squared away before I leave. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that you were, you know, that you were leaving, but thanks for letting me know. And and I was and I mentioned to her and to Jaden's, to my son's, excuse me, general ed teacher, that that Jaden had been struggling because he didn't have at the time a point person to speak to, a case manager, an ESE teacher to speak to, which he had always previously had in other schools, and that he was feeling a little lost, frankly, with organization, with managing technology. It is all overwhelming in a new school with a new curriculum, new programs. So at that point, I was told that that one of the aides would be taking over as his point person, even though it had been very clear to me that there was no point person, that the ESE teacher up until that point had not served as the point person, because during one of the meetings, I asked, who is the point person? This was a big thing for me, because that person has really acted for our family as the connection between school and home, which is so important, and it is even more important this year when my son is learning from home. So I felt like there was a huge gap. And during one of the meetings, when I asked that question, the school psychologist said, "Oh, well, I'll be the point person." So it was very clear that that role was not being filled by anyone. And when I brought it up, I was told that this instructional aide would be taking over as that. And, again, more red flags for me. I did not feel that there was a cohesive effort to make his programming make sense at all.
Are we in the second meeting at this point, or are we planning for the second meeting?
We're getting ready for the February meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the ESE teacher went out on maternity leave. The
Mhm.
school appointed an instructional aide to do some of the connecting stuff for your son and help with some of the organizational concerns. And as I recall, you had a good relationship with your classroom teacher.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And he was responsive to your concerns when you would bring something forward to him.
He was responsive. He was supportive. Absolutely. I felt really good about that relationship. And again, as the primary contact with my son, I felt, well, that's very, very important. I can deal on the back end with all of this other stuff, but having that, I wanted to preserve that. It was so important to me to preserve that relationship.
So then we come to the February meeting, the part 2 of your second IEP here.
Right.
And how did that go?
It went well. I had a good feeling at that meeting. I felt like my concerns were being addressed. We were going down the list of concerns. Changes were being made. I felt good about it. And I think one of my biggest concerns at that point was, I want to see the document before this meeting ends. And I requested that, and I was told, well, we can't do that because, we're virtual. And I thought, well, then this is just going to be the same thing. Like, we can't see the notes. We can't see the actual document. I want some time to review the document so, we can be in agreement. And as a team, we agreed on that I would have some time after. There was no time limit set in the meeting, and that meeting was recorded. But everyone agreed, okay, well, we'll keep it open so you can review and then submit any changes.
Well, and what I want to point out about that recorded meeting, you asked that the meeting be recorded. And the reason we wanted the meeting to be recorded is because, just as you said, there's all that typing going on. We want to know what we verbally committed to. So when you review the document, since you don't get it for a couple days anyways, in a recorded meeting, seeing it visually, you'll be able to see what was typed on the document on the screen as opposed to what is printed when you receive it. So when you got the final version, what did you get, Marina?
Well, so I got a version of the document that we had discussed, but the big thing to note during that meeting is that we could not see the notes that were being typed.
But the recording you got.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I asked for a video recording of the Zoom meeting, and I received an audio. I was told that they couldn't provide the video.
They
They
didn't
could only,
They didn't record the video or some
right,
such.
that it was not available, that I don't know, yeah, that it was not available. So I only got the audio recording, which, put a huge burden on me, because I literally sat there and went through, listened to the audio recording and had to go through the document to make sure that all of the bits and pieces were there. And it took a long time. Yeah, and then I had to compare to previous documents, since this process by now has really gotten, stretched out. So it was very time consuming.
And then, so go ahead and talk about the notes.
So in the notes, it just did not capture what had transpired. During the meeting, we kept being told, well, we can't make those changes to the IEP. We'll just capture it in the notes, but don't do it now. Don't do it now. You can do that later.
It's a time. We'll fix
Yeah,
that.
don't do it now. So I never saw, until I got the actual document, the draft, and compared it to the audio, what was in the notes. And there were some changes that I requested, and they weren't major changes, but I wanted the notes to accurately reflect what had transpired during the meeting, as notes should. So yeah, I requested those changes.
And they weren't new things. They were corrections to things that the audio supported. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely accurate. And I'm sorry. Let's see.
Did we lose you?
Still here.
Sorry about that. I had a little glitch. They were absolutely accurate. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. We were talking about
the changes you requested to the notes were nothing new. It was just corrections based on the audio.
Yeah, they were minor changes, and I felt really good after that meeting. I thought, okay, we're really coming to an agreement. These are not big changes. They're just little technicalities. I'll send these over and we'll be done.
And that was the end, right?
That was the end, yeah.
And nothing else happened, and there's no reason that why we're here today.
Oh no, no.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So when you sent your corrections back, what happened?
So there was a delay. That's another thing that I have found is just a running theme in this district, is like a 48 hours to answer an email, 3 days to answer an email. Simple things, simple requests, simple questions. I don't understand that. It does not leave a parent with a good feeling, because if a district is being transparent, and it's very easy to give answers to easy questions, you should have quick access to that. You don't need to check with your district rep. You just know, oh yeah, well, okay, no problem. So that always made me feel a little uneasy, like, oh, why is it taking them 3 days to get back to me after I sent these like minor corrections? I don't understand it. So yeah, it was, several days. I got a response saying, we can't make these changes. We'll have to reconvene again. And then I got a meeting notice. I received a meeting notice for another IEP meeting, and they had added people. They added an attorney for the district, and they added the executive director. And again, I feel like I keep saying this word, but I was shocked. I was shocked and thought, what is happening? I thought we were okay. I thought we had reached a good place, and this IEP was going to be done. So at that point, I really I felt a little defeated. I was really tired also of dealing with this. It had taken so long, and essentially I tried to gather my thoughts and figure out what was happening, like what is happening right now. And concurrently, some other things happened. Yeah.
So talk about the changes that happened with the classroom teacher.
So the classroom teacher had a very unfortunate accident, and was going to be out for a couple of weeks. But so, obviously as accidents happen, it was from one day to the next. So on, I think it was a Thursday, the parents in that classroom received a message from the classroom teacher saying, I've had an accident. I don't know how long I'm going to be out, but I'm, waiting to have a procedure done, surgery. So, the students can work off of Blackboard, the remote students. Zooming into the classroom is optional. So, again, this happened on a Thursday, and then there was a Friday. And, as a parent that has experience in other schools, I thought, why isn't the principal emailing the classroom and saying, this is the plan, this is what's going to happen for both brick and mortar students and remote students? Like, our teacher is out. Like, I just felt like, man, this poor guy is, in the hospital and he has to send an email. It didn't sit well with me. But, I waited and I thought, well, I'll give them until Monday to contact me. And surely by that time, they'll have a plan.
Have a plan.
Yeah,
right?
they'll have a plan. And they, at that point on Monday, I had to reach out and say, is there a link for remote students for us to join the substitutes Zoom classroom, or is, what should we do? And it took some time to get a response for that. And once again, it was the general ed teacher who responded to that and said, oh yeah, the substitute has, has set up this link. And here is, but it's optional. It's optional. So, I said, thank you. But again, I reached out to the principal because I did not feel that it was right to make this person who was recovering from an accident deal with my questions. And I said, what's the plan for accessing special education services? Like, we are remote. I don't have a schedule. And to backtrack a little bit, I had been asking for a schedule of services for like a good month. And I kept being told, well, we can't discuss this during IEP meetings, but reach out to the ESC liaison and she'll provide you with that information. So I had already done that. I had requested that schedule of services 3 times already and had not gotten a response. So once again, here I am asking, something has happened and I need a schedule so I can essentially monitor my son's learning and facilitate in order for him to access different sessions with providers. And at that point, yeah,
I'm just going to say, important to point out, now you're paying attention. Now you're watching what services are being delivered. Now we know exactly what's going on in the educational field as far as delivery of services, communication with providers, not to mention, just general education not being provided, just the ability to go to school, which is a problem all on its own. But I'm just going to point that out very clearly at this point, because when you get later in the story, I think it becomes very relevant as far as what the outcome is and how we got there and what we know to be true. So
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. I think that's a very valid point that when we get to this point after, the teacher's accident and his subsequent absence, I did start paying more attention, very close attention to, okay, how is he receiving services, when, and with whom? And it became apparent that the school did not have a plan in place, not only to cover the teacher's absence and to provide ESC services, but there was no schedule. Because when I requested that schedule again I think that was the 4th time now, to the principal, again, there was a 2-day lag, and then I got a response, and it was bullet points that I had submitted in response to the IEP document on February 5th. asking for clarification, like, okay, so these are the services. So I received an email that was cut and pasted those bullet points to answer my question, my request for a schedule of services. And again, this was just more validation. There is no plan. No one knows what's happening. My son is not receiving services.
What was the tone? I think that's important. Like, there's this customer service thread that runs throughout your process. And so, how were you, like, what was the back and forth? I know email, sometimes it's hard to tell with tone, but what was your perception as a parent?
You know, the first couple of emails with the school principal felt very placating, like, oh, well, you know, this is unexpected, so we're dealing with it, but rest assured that we're dealing with it. So when I pressed for more information, okay, that's great that you're dealing with it. How is my son going to access services? I was met with a tone of, oof, you're being really rude. I was mischaracterized. You're being really rude. You're demanding information from my staff. And again, shocked. I was shocked by that response. Like, and I was very clear in how I responded to that accusation by saying, I'm not being rude. I am simply asking for the information that I need in order for my son to access the services that he is entitled to. There's nothing in my tone or in the way that I am asking you or what I'm asking you that can be misconstrued as me being rude or accusatory. I simply need the information and I need it today.
Right. And I'm just going to jump in because this is such a common theme that we see systemically, but the narrative that the districts, I'm saying that plural, not just, the district you're talking about today, but we see this all over, is this intent to turn it around and blame shift and mischaracterize the situation. And it works sometimes. I mean, we've been in meetings with parents where they've done that, and we see the parents like almost back down, and it's bullying, frankly. So yeah, but if you don't know that, you're kind of like, wait, am I being rude? Wait, what did I, so that I just wanted to jump in there and say that.
It's true. It's very unpleasant. That it's a very unpleasant situation. And I feel that the district, which is constantly operating from a business model, and we all know this, and it happens in every district, and they do not have, the children's best interests at heart, that the onus is on the parent to prove that certain supports and services are needed. The district, it will not just go along with these things. And they do operate in a way that makes you feel like you're somehow being sneaky and conniving, which is just a projection. As parents, I don't want to spend my time in IEP meetings fighting with people. I don't want to do that. This is not a pleasant experience at all. I just want what's best for my kid. Like, that's it.
And you have to be his voice.
Right.
You don't have a choice.
I don't have a choice. And if I know that, in my private time, I am not a confrontational person. This is the stuff that gives me hives, that makes me feel, keeps me up at night. I hate it, but it is for my son. And I will go to the end of the world for my son. There is no, and every bone in my body will be mama bear when I need to be. And as with any parent.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been through this meeting. They invite an attorney, they invite an executive director. And so what did you finally decide to do in response?
So my response was to ask for more information, to ask for clarity. I thought that we had had a meeting on February 5th. We had a document. There were some minor changes that I requested. The response was this, which just like escalated. And I wanted clarity.
Disproportional.
Absolutely. These were not big changes. These were, they were just minor changes. And so I didn't understand the response and I wanted clarity. So I asked, what do you want to do at this meeting? Send me an agenda. Send me an agenda so I know what this meeting is going to be about. And in the agenda, there was no point, no time allotted for parent concerns, which that was the whole point of having another meeting, was to discuss the very minor changes that needed to be made to the existing IEP document. And I asked for clarification on, the roles of the folks that had been added. Once again, delay in response. And I did not get a clear explanation as to what was going to be happening at that meeting. And I came to that point again where I got really nervous, like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? How long are we going to have to be dealing with this? And I said, fine, you know what? Fine. We have this IEP. They're not going to make the minor changes. Fine. The notes don't capture what happened. Fine. We'll let that go, but we'll have an IEP. And so I signed it and I forwarded it to them. And I thought at that point, we're done. Like this is it. I signed the IEP, we're done. And I got no response, no acknowledgement that they had received my signed IEP from February 5th, which was the last meeting that was held. And instead, I received a document dated February 24th, which was the date of the meeting that they had scheduled, that I had said I am not going to attend because you haven't provided an explanation as to what's going to happen during that meeting. And it was very intimidating. I mean, I'll be frank, it was very, very intimidating, that prospect. And the document that I received dated for a day that no meeting was held. I mean, my first question to the district was, well, was there a meeting held on February 24th? They said no.
They wrote back, no. We have that in
Yeah,
writing.
they said no, it's in writing. No meeting was held. And I thought, well, how is this? It's a completely new IEP dated February 24th with 3 pages of additional notes and a prior written notice.
For a meeting that didn't happen.
For a meeting that didn't happen.
Mhm.
It was shocking.
So how did you respond to that?
I mean, I said, how is this? I signed the IEP. How is this? Where has this document come from? And there was no response. And I just kept getting reminders, to attend, to sign this IEP. I mean, it was like for a month.
And so what course of action did you take at that point?
So at that point, I really had to figure out what to do. And I decided to file a state complaint.
And so was that a difficult process for you?
Very. It was very difficult.
And so as a parent, what did you have to do to compile a state complaint?
So the state complaint it is an arduous process, and you basically have to compile, all of the evidence that you have to support what you are alleging happened. Again, thankfully, I knew that I had everything in writing, but again, it takes a very, very long time to go through and piece things together. And, as you've heard in my story, there are sort of so many little tangents. So to put all of that together in a cohesive way, and then to support it with a narrative, it took a long time. It was exhausting.
And you also had to know what you wanted. Like
Right.
You had to offer a remedy.
Right.
And I think that's such a key point for parents. So often, you've been wronged. You know that what they're doing for your child isn't what your child needs, but you as the parent then have to know what will resolve the concerns that you have. And you have to be able to write that out.
So Susan, before we continue with Marina's story, can you just high level recap for parents that are listening, what remedies in a state complaint are available?
So it has to be something that relates to a statute that the state can rule on. So just for an example, one of the things that Marina asked for was an apology, because the notes that had been developed for the meeting that didn't happen had some accusatory language that she as a parent had behaved inappropriately. And the state said, you know, it may have happened. You may be entitled to an apology when we on a phone call with them. However, we don't have jurisdiction to order that you receive an apology. So the remedies that parents ask for, and I'm not sure that it was inappropriate, it's at least in writing that that's what you wanted. And it went to the district. They saw that you felt you were entitled to an apology. However, when the state came back after all of your very well documented and written concerns and asked for remedies, they pulled out 4 issues from all of that that had statutory implications that they could rule on.
Right. I just wanted that clarified before we went further. Thank you.
And so how long did this process take for the state complaint?
So it's a 60-day process. And I do have to say that, you know, none of these systems are user friendly. These are not, you do not, when you log on and you know, get the information on how to file a state complaint, there is no, I mean, there's a form that you fill out that's fairly straightforward, but then there is no, no model to follow. Like, this is what's needed. This is what you should include. I really relied on both of you. And, you know, we had many conversations as to, you know, how to put the pieces together in a coherent way. But it's a process that I would have had an incredibly difficult time navigating on my own, which again, is not fair to parents. And, you know, and we had a phone call with the investigators. They explained what the process would be, that it would be a 60-day process. At the end of that process, that was it. We would get a report on their findings, and that was it. So, yeah.
And there was some back and forth with clarifications from them.
Yes. Yes, I provided any additional information.
And in the beginning, they said you had options. You could have a state facilitated IEP meeting, which is another IEP meeting after what we just went through, and now we have a fake document. So how are we going to fix that in an IEP meeting? Or you could have mediation. Why don't you talk for a minute about your thoughts with that?
Right. So when we spoke to the state and they explained the options that I had at that point, one of them was exactly the facilitated IEP. And I asked the investigator, okay, so during the IEP, will I be able to see a document? Because that is one of the biggest issues, you know, that has run across all of these meetings. And she said, no, you won't be able to see the IEP. And I thought, well, then that's a moot point. That negates that option.
Well, didn't she say she couldn't tell them what they had to do? Wasn't it you wouldn't be able to, it was that she really couldn't intervene with how they were behaving?
Yes, you are right. Exactly. And it just seemed like, okay, well, we've been there, we've done that. We're not getting anywhere with that. And then she explained mediation. And I chose mediation. You know, when I submitted my state complaint, then the investigators asked, are you interested in either of these options? And I said, let's do mediation. It's going to be a quicker remedy. My son will get the supports that he is entitled to in a more expeditious way. And we don't have to wait the 60 days. And sadly, the district decided to say no. They were not willing to go to mediation.
So the state complaint proceeded, and it did take the full 60 days. And I think it's important to note for parents that haven't been through this, that during that time, the state is contacting the district, asking them to produce evidence that supports their version of the facts of what transpired. And the parent does not receive that same information at the same time that the state gets it. You don't know what the district is telling the state. You don't know what evidence they're supporting or submitting to support whatever it is that they're saying that they did. And so at the end of the 60 days, what happened?
Well, and I'll go to that in a second, but I'll also explain that during those 60 days, the school pulled it together. All of a sudden, if there were absences, somebody contacted me and would tell me, this is the link that you need to access this provider. Even though there were still some glitches, there were a couple of sessions of services missed, but they were remedied the next week and they were made up. So again, the pieces can work. It can all work when there's effort made. So then we received the report after the state complaint, and it was not as comprehensive of a report as I thought it would be.
But there were findings.
Yes, there were findings. I was awarded compensatory education for the period of time between October, when my son started school, to the first IEP meeting, but it was not sufficient. I could tell that that's a big chunk of time. It did not make sense. The time did not align with the time that was missed.
And there was some corrective action that was ordered.
And corrective action, including training for staff, which I think is very important.
But there were some issues that the state said were outside their jurisdiction or their purview. And
Correct.
so
And just note, all of this while this same district is under an investigative report, scrutiny by the state for issues involving ESE students. Here we are yet again.
Right. And one of the big issues that was not addressed was this document that was created out of thin air without a meeting, without an IEP meeting, that was completely changed in the notes, that disparaged my character on a legal fake document. That was one of the issues that the state said, that's out of our purview. We can't address that. So,
But they did say within the report, on this day, a document was modified. They could have said there, was no meeting. There are things they could have done, but they didn't. They said it was outside their jurisdiction. So they identified that it occurred, and they also said we aren't going to rule on it.
Right. So you're sort of you have a little bit of correction, but you're in limbo. And so one of the things that you were awarded was another IEP meeting. Aren't you happy about that?
I can't get away from these meetings.
Go
But
ahead, Sue.
she contacted the district. Or are you not there yet?
I don't know. Go ahead, ask your question.
Well, I was just going to say you're awarded another IEP meeting, but in order to prepare for that IEP meeting, you contacted the district because you needed some more information. Talk about that for a minute.
I will. And I have to say, throughout this whole process of filing the state complaint, of waiting for the investigation to be completed, not once did I hear from the district or any sort of acknowledgement of, oh, Marina, you've filed a state complaint. Do you want to talk to us about that? Do you have anything, on your mind? What can we do? Nothing. Same thing with when the report came back. No one has contacted me to say, these were the findings. This is when we should do the compensatory education. This is, our plan for the schedule. No one has said anything. The only thing that they have said is, let's schedule another IEP meeting, which has been shocking. So at that point, I contacted the district and I requested the records that the district submitted to the state as a response to the state complaint. And let me see, I'll show you. These are the documents. And this is the stack of paper, that I have to go through, and look at with, very, very carefully. I don't have an assistant to do that for me. I don't have a colleague to say, you take half, I'll take half, let's divide and conquer. I have to do that. And again, this is something that I'd like to stress for all parents out there. We don't have the luxury of leaving our jobs at the end of the day, recharging and coming back refreshed and ready to tackle our work. This is not my job. I have to do this and also parent and also manage medical needs and educational needs and emotional needs and just be present for my children. So the school district is robbing me of my time, of my energy, of, quite frankly, my sleep and my well-being by making me now go through these records to see if they are accurate, because the reports that the findings of the state complaint do not align with what has happened. So are these records accurate? And it's up to me to go through it. Again, I don't have a team behind. I don't have, I have both of you, which thank goodness, I'm so grateful for that. But we are not a school district.
No, and the lion's share of the work to, it's definitely David and Goliath. You are constantly fighting the machine that has all the money, all the resources, all the staff, legal counsel, and you're a mom trying to do it all, with a little bit of help from us, just helping with guidance, but the work, the hours worth of work are yours, and the emotional toll that it takes on you, in addition to just the time that it grabs.
Absolutely.
And they gave you those records for free, right?
I was so, yeah, it was insane. I got an invoice saying, once you pay this $117, you can have the records. Okay. I mean, again, what?
Well, and you went to the top. You went to the superintendent,
I did.
who wants to go to every school board meeting and talk about our fantastic district. And you went to him, and he told his staff to do that very quickly. He told his staff to do that. But when did you get a response, really? Did you have to ask again, or did they immediately respond?
No, so I sent this request on Monday morning, first thing on Monday morning, and I got a very quick response saying, okay, I'm going to send this to, the appropriate person. And in my request, I said, I need these records today. And if they were to ask me and say, Marina, give us your records that you submitted to the state. And I mean, it's probably a comparable stack of paper. You guys have seen those files. In my little rinky-dink home printer, if somebody sent me that request at 7 a.m., I guarantee you that by 5 p.m. or before, I would have those records ready. Why? Because I just submitted them to the state. I have a Dropbox with all the files. I have them all organized. I just had to submit them. They are readily available, and they should have been readily available for me. So I didn't get a response on Monday. On Tuesday, I followed up and said, hey, when can I pick these up? Again, no response until the following day, when I once again thought, oh, here we go again. So I made a request and I copied school board members, and then I got a response. And I was able to pick up the records within 2 hours.
$117.
$117 later, which again speaks to my immense privilege, because who can do that? So yeah, this just really speaks to the fact that the district relies on this, and it relies on the exhaustion of parents. There is no one, not even me, can sustain this level of oversight, of constant monitoring, of constant emails, of constant pushing back simply to obtain and maintain services. Like, no one can sustain this. And it's why I truly believe this is not an individual battle. We cannot do this on our own. We all need each other. We need parents and families to come together. We need to fight collaboratively, with advocates, with all of us together, or else it's not sustainable. And it's not going to change this incredibly broken system that keeps failing our children repeatedly.
And before we leave, and thank you for that impassioned plea, because you are so right. If parents don't unite and we don't stop working in isolation and recognizing that it's not just Marina's story, this is the story.
Yep.
We hear this from parents over and over and over again, and the facts are a little different, and you know what has transpired, but the response to problems and the delay and deflect and you deny and gaslighting, that is a across the board response when problems arise. Instead of just saying, what does this child need? How can we work together to provide it? And if we have a point of disagreement, what can we do to work through it? Like, communicate, treat each other with kindness, be authentic in your desire to serve our children. A lot of that would go very far to eliminate how families feel about the system. And that's not usually about their teachers. It's not about the frontline staff. It's about the broken procedural problem solving or lack thereof that happens over and over. But Marina, I want you to talk a little bit, and I saved this for the end, about the impact on your son. Because you wouldn't go through any of this if it wasn't about your child.
Right. You know, the impact on my son has been that he is not given the support that he deserves. And as a family, we have all experienced the stress of battling the system. And it's really it's not fair to him. It is not fair to him that he's just not receiving the support or the services that he is entitled to.
Thank you so much for going through that detailed litany of issues and time that you have, between October and now, because it's still ongoing, it's still not resolved. Are you okay sharing with what your next step is actually going to be? Because it's changed a little bit today.
Sure. So I actually have a meeting with a superintendent tomorrow. Specifically, I'm hoping to discuss why and how this fake IEP document was created without a meeting. I'm hoping that he's going to address and answer that question. And then I have another IEP meeting scheduled for next week. So
stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
So I'm going to wrap up just to acknowledge and thank the people that are commenting and sending questions and high-level answer just a couple things. So there is someone asking about Spanish-speaking people because she feels that nobody, they are really left behind, and we totally agree. And I know that's near and dear to Marina's heart. So yes, as we move forward with the app and some other projects we have, which we'll be talking about, that is a piece of this, and we totally understand and agree with that. Marina, I don't know if you have a comment about that.
I'll just say that I am originally from Spain. I was born and raised in Spain. English is my second language. So this is absolutely something that I am very passionate about. The fact that Spanish speaking families, or families who don't speak English, it would be impossible to navigate the system. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. So that means that those children do not have equal access.
And the other comment we have is, Marina, you're a rock star. Hallelujah. All kinds of good comments. We totally agree.
Thank you.
There's one comment, Susan, I'm going to ask you to clarify. There's a little bit of confusion about signing for IEP documents and signing for participation or signing for the initial IEP. So can you just clarify that for some of the people that I can tell by some of the comments are a little bit confused?
So there are points in the IEP process where parents are asked to sign consent. It is supposed to be informed consent. So before your child is placed in special education services for the first time, you have to give consent. Before your child can be evaluated, either the first time or in subsequent triennial review reevals, you have to sign consent. Before an agency can be invited to an IEP meeting, an outside agency, parents have to give consent. So those are all signatures that before actions can take place, the parent has to sign. But for annual IEPs, there is no consent. It's just a participation signature that is not required. So, we do it. We have that process where they send DocuSign, and everybody, if you're online or in a live meeting, you're signing on the line that you participated in the development of the document, but it does not preclude the document from being implemented if there is no signature. So just to be clear, I hope that answers whatever question was out there.
Yes, I think it does. I think it's important to note in that initial IEP that you develop, that's really when you have your leverage, and that's really sometimes we are told after the fact where there's a lot of pushing to parents to say, this is a great document, it's going to be wonderful, but be careful, make sure it is what you think your child deserves. That's where you've got a little bit of power. After that, it's correct. You're just signing for participation, and you need to invoke your grievance rights if you don't agree with the documents.
One other signature that two consent places I didn't mention that might be important. One is before they can move your child to a modified curriculum. If they're looking at access points, that is something a parent has to consent to. You need to have informed consent. You need to understand the impacts of that before you sign. And the second is before they can move your child to a separate day school, you have to give consent in Florida before that type of placement is made. So those are two other places where in the IEP document, before it can be implemented with those changes, parents have to agree to it.
And access points is the Florida name for a modified curriculum. Every state has their own name for a modified curriculum. And some districts have separate day schools and others don't, not to be confused with alternative schools, which may or may not be our next Zoom.
So, other questions, Sue?
Thank you so much, Marina. You are amazing.
Pleasure.
And thank you for sharing your story, because this is what's going to make a difference. All this other stuff, we're like mosquitoes to them. That's not our intention. We just want our kids to get educated. We need a group, strong, smart, bold women, moms, to affect this change. And some dads, if you're out there.
And remember, if you want to tell your story, please, on Apple and Android, we have School Talk USA. It is an app. We hope it's easy to use. There are continuous updates happening because it's new. And you just click on the icon. You can search by your school's name and click on the icon for your school. There's a little plus sign. You just hit it and you can tell your story. We give you a random number, so you're anonymous, because unfortunately retaliation's real. And we hear that from families. Sometimes they're afraid to tell their story. I would suggest you're not giving your child's name, tell your story factually. But parents need to know they're not alone, and we need to know what's really happening. And so we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to share what you know to be your truth. And I think as we see that lots of families are experiencing similar concerns, it gives us some power in numbers to try to really influence and make change in this system. And that, the goal, it's all about outcomes for our kids. Mm-hmm. It's why we're all still here. It's because our kids matter too much for us not to continue to do this work.
Thank you so much, ladies, again, for giving me a place to tell my story. And thank you to all of you who are listening. It means a lot to me. And I think we can all do this together.
We agree. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.